This is Stoneblock 4, the newest mod pack from Feed the Beast, full of quests, dangerous bosses, and amazing technology. Will I thrive and take down the great fiery boss Ignis, or will I die trying to survive in this stone-filled world? Let's find out. Alright, we are here in Stoneblock 4, the newest iteration of the Stoneblock mod, and I am so excited to play this mod pack. It looks super fun, but I do know a bit on how to get started, so first things first, we have to talk to the Echo Projection here. After completing the first task, which was literally just to claim a task with the Echo Projection, it took us on this super cool animation towards the world creation portal. Upon walking into the portal, I was greeted with several different cave options, where I chose the dark and mysterious cave. I felt this would give me the most authentic stone block experience. To start, I gathered some stone pebbles and with them crafted the first few pieces of cobblestone. Now, one thing I really liked about this mod pack is that it has a great quest system, so it's super easy for a beginner like me to figure out what resources I need to progress. Speaking of these quests, I had a few to claim rewards from. The first of which was to speak with the Echo, which we completed before entering the cave. The next quest was to create my first cave, which obviously had already been completed. This one rewarded me with 9 dumplings, and I mean, come on, who's gonna say no to some dumplings? The next quest I had to complete was simply to enable events in the world, which spawned in a loot bee. Loot bees will spawn randomly in the cave and drop various loot. This one gave us a diamond and a piece of honeycomb. This wasn't really useful to us now, but hopefully I'd get better loot from these in the future. The next quest was to build a stone crafting table, which was simple enough to complete. Once this was done, I could finally start making some tools, the first being a stone hammer. Using some stone sticks and a few pieces of cobble, I crafted the stone hammer. Now, this tool is critical to the entire mod pack, since not only does it allow me to get cobblestone, but it's also used to break down blocks. So with this knowledge, I broke down some cobblestone into gravel, and then broke down the gravel into dirt. It was then on to make the next tool of the world, a stone crook, made simply from 4 stone sticks. This tool was also crucial to the mod pack, as breaking dirt with the crook gives a bunch of random saplings. It was then time to grow one of these saplings, and you may be wondering, how do you grow a sapling in a dark cave with no bone meal? Well, you twerk for it. Yes, a notable feature in Feed the Beast mod packs is the ability to grow crops by twerking. Anyways, after harvesting the tree, I could finally make a chest to start getting organized. I also crafted a furnace and started cooking some charcoal. Doing this completed another quest and rewarded me with some hoppers, which was pretty cool. I then needed to make a stone hammer, which is totally different than the stone hammer we currently have. This one required smooth stone to craft and also had a totally different purpose. The first hammer was to break down blocks, but this one was to mine out large areas. That's right, this thing could break a 3x3 in one swing. I started using what I think is my new favorite tool I've ever seen and expanded the cave out slightly. The next quest taught me how to get water from leaves. So first was to craft some wooden shears, using them to collect some leaves. The next step was to, well, I'm not sure since I was totally interrupted. Oh! What the heck? Oh my gosh, that scared me so much. What was that? Now that the distractions were gone, I learned about the basin. By placing it on the ground and stomping on some leaves, I could squeeze out any water left in them, collecting it in the basin. I didn't really know what the water was for yet, but hey, I got paid to stomp on some leaves. The quest book then taught me about the next critical tool in this mod pack. Using some leaves I dried on the campfire, I could use the crook to get some straw. Using this straw, a stick, and a pebble, I could now craft a crude brush. This brush was now my way of getting important resources. By brushing dirt, sand, gravel, or even dust, I could get different resources like gold or iron. I also discovered something called Ultimine, which essentially speeds up tedious tasks. If I want to brush a bunch of dirt blocks, I could use Ultimine to brush them all at the same time. My new task was to return to spawn, so I typed in the command and entered this super cool portal that opened up. Here, the Echo of Guidance told me I'd need to craft a Chronon generator to be able to travel to the world engine. This was a lot to take in, but I'm sure it would make sense soon. While I was here though, I also bought a quest book, just to make opening the quest a little easier. I then returned home to work on the next task, requiring clay from brushing sand. Once the clay was turned into bricks, I could craft a bonsai pot. These were super cool as they were essentially an automatic wood farm. All you had to do was place in a sapling and an axe, and it was good to go. And just look how cool it was seeing the tiny trees grow. It was then on to upgrading my stone hammer into an iron one. To do this, I brushed some gravel to get iron chunks. These couldn't be smelted, however, and it took me a while to figure out, but these can be turned into iron clusters, which can be smelted. I was then informed of a healing spring somewhere north of my cave, so after locating it on my map, I started mining. Normally, you wouldn't think that this would be that fun, but using the hammer was just so satisfying. By day 3, I had reached the healing spring. Ooh, wow, that is crazy looking. Now, I'm a little worried that there's something in here that might hurt me, but if it's called the healing springs, it should be fine. I explored around, taking in the cozy environment of the springs, before grabbing some bamboo and sugarcane. I also grabbed some amethyst for the quest I was working on. I did want to get back to work on making the chronon generator, so I needed to complete one more task, getting redstone. Thankfully, this was pretty easy, as all I had to do was brush up some dust. With the redstone acquired, it was now time to craft the chronon generator. I first crafted a chronon cell with some ores and an amethyst shard, and when combining the cell with some iron, a clock, and glass, I got the generator. I turned it in for the quest and I got a chronon generator as a reward. I'm not sure why I had to turn it in just to get it back, but hey, I now have access to the world engine, so it's fine. Before I messed with the world engine, however, I wanted to finish one more quest from the Echo. So I returned and the Echo gave me a quest to cure a zombie villager in the healing springs. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, actually yeah, it was. I broke all the torches in the hallway to the springs, and while I waited, I fixed up the cave a bit by adding in a spruce floor. I also crafted a set of iron armor, since, well, I was working with hostile mobs and I didn't want to die. Eventually, a zombie villager spawned, and once I had him separated, I scooped him up with the ender lead I got from the Echo. This is why I said this was so easy, since I could just drop him off in the springs. Of course, I had to clear out my hallway full of mobs first, but then I could drop off the zombie. After a few seconds, it cured into a super strange looking villager. Oh, what the heck? Why does the villager look like that? Oh, that is so weird. After staring at this freak for a bit, I scooped him up with the lead and headed back home. It was now time to learn how to enslave them for eternity. First things first, I had to dry some rotten flesh to make leather. Combining these with an amethyst shard made an amethyst resonance charm. With an iron stick, I could combine these at the world engine to make an echo encoder. This thing was super useful, as I can now make villager tokens for my villagers. On day 6, I crafted an unearther, which is essentially a villager enslavement cage. Fortunately for this villager, he was a nitwit and wouldn't accept the job. To solve this, I would need to duplicate him to get another. So I got to work on a farm, as I would need either 32 baked potatoes or 32 bread. Luckily, my glutes were great at growing crops. After cooking the potatoes, I took the villager token to the world engine and duplicated it. Unfortunately, the first villager attracted to the smoker as a job block and took the wrong job. However, the second one worked just fine and became a geologist. I can now stick him in the unearther, and if I gave him brushes and gravel, he will now automatically brush up different ores like coal and iron. On day 7, I wanted to start making the cave a bit more like a base. I had an idea to have a lobby area further down and staircases leading up to the main hallways where different stuff would be. So I started digging down, built up a lobby area, and then started work on a staircase up to the first hallway. I brought down my items and put up this nice painting I got to liven up the place. The next day I returned to the Echo of Guidance, who, after completing the task, referred me to the next Echo projection, the Quartermaster. I also had to talk to one of the 2 other Echoes, either the Machinist or the Magician. I chose to first work on the Machinist tasks, the first being to shape obsidian, which would end up taking me a while to complete. First, using the entropy manipulator I got from the Machinist, I could now turn stone into lava, which was definitely pretty cool. I needed this since the cobblegen needed a lava bucket for its recipe, so after smelting some stone, I could now craft it. The next thing I needed was an auto hammer block, which was pretty simple to craft. Once done, I could now automatically hammer the cobble that came from the generator. It took me a few minutes to figure out, messing around with some different hopper configurations until I got it. I now had an automatic flow of gravel straight into this chest. With that done, I could now search for the Quartermaster and talk with him. Using the knowledge of the Quartermaster, I returned home to make a metallurgic infuser. Once again, it was a pretty simple craft, but I finally got to use a new ore I wasn't familiar with, osmium. I then worked on making the dielectric casing. Making some dielectric paste from some lava and clay balls, I could combine them with some iron bars and iron to make the casing. The last thing I needed was a power source, where the task gave me 3 good beginner options. I decided to go with the heat generator, since I already had all the materials for it. On day 10, I returned to the quartermaster, where he gave me the task of making 64 world engine blocks. This was good, since it taught me how to use the metallurgic infuser. Depending on what you needed to make, you put a fuel source in the left, and with the energy from the generator can infuse a mineral, in this case iron. I could then infuse the enriched iron to make steel dust, a critical component for world engine blocks. Next, I made some electrum wire by first turning some gold into gold dust using a cutting board, and then mixing that with silver dust in the infuser. Once I had the plates, I could turn them into wire using a stone cutter. I wanted to start automating things just a little bit, so I started with the unearther and raised it up a block. I threw in some hoppers and a chest before working on getting another villager when I had the jump scare of a lifetime. Oh! What the heck was that? Oh my gosh. That was the worst thing that could have ever happened. Thank God they didn't do any actual damage. Oh my gosh, that is some sort of sick joke by these developers. It took a few minutes, but once my heart rate finally returned to normal, I headed out to the world engine to duplicate some villagers. I employed one as an archaeologist and stuck him in the second unearther. This guy would be able to brush blocks like dirt, sand, or dust. Pretty much anything else the geologist can't. But for now, I started him with some dirt. Once he was in, I started decorating the area a bit since I was getting a little sick of all the stone. I added some stripped logs around the area and also worked on replacing the boring stone walls with a mix of stone bricks, cobble, and stone. I also put in a ceiling with some deep slate bricks, but ran out of those pretty quick. I then went to the cobble gen and threw on another auto hammer block that I got from a task. This would now automatically get me dirt, which I used for the other unearther. Carrying on with the automation initiative, I built an auto smelter across from the unearthers. I also added a couple chests and hoppers to funnel in the items to the villagers, since I could only hold a stack at a time. Back at the infuser, I figured out that you don't need to constantly feed lava buckets in the generator, but instead could just have lava next to it. This was a critical discovery, as I needed to make a lot of steel and electrum for the world engine, which I spent the rest of the day on. I did get a visit from a creature called the questing ram. I had zero clue what it did, but I kept him in a pen for safekeeping. Progress on the world engine blocks was slow. So on day 14, I installed a second metallurgic infuser. By day 15, I had crafted all the necessary materials to make some world engine blocks. So I headed to the world engine and put in the components when nothing happened. After doing some searching, I figured that I needed some way to power the world engine. This had me stumped for a while. I tried everything from coal to one of my heat generators, but nothing worked. In retrospect, I think I had the heat generator facing the wrong way, but I didn't know that at the time. I eventually came across something called an energy cube, which can store and eject energy. So after gathering the necessary components, I crafted it and placed it next to my heat generator. Sure enough, it was storing energy, albeit rather slowly. So while that filled up, I got to work on some other tasks, like putting in some spruce flooring. I also went to gather some deep slate since I wanted to finish decorating the villager area. I also got to work on one of the corners of the main area, adding some stripped logs and a deep slate floor. I wanted this to have a mad scientist type of vibe, and I think after adding the cobble gen, it was starting to get there. The rest of the day was spent messing around with furnaces, since I discovered something called an iron furnace. I crafted a few and tested them out, and let me tell you, these things were fast. So fast in fact that I didn't really need 8 of them, since just 1 or 2 auto furnaces of these would do the trick just fine. I was so excited by the thought of faster furnaces that I immediately gathered materials for the next upgrade, the gold furnace. Now, if you thought those iron furnaces were fast, these were on another level. I also added a second one for peak smelting efficiency. By the end of the day, the energy cube had enough energy stored. So I took it to the world engine, ejected the energy into it, and finally was able to craft some world engine blocks. When picking up the energy cube, it fell into the depths of the world engine, to which I jumped down. I honestly thought I was stuck at this point, but in my inventory I saw a creative flying effect, which yes, literally meant I could fly around like I was in creative mode. This gave a crazy view of the world engine, which I had to say looked really cool. I settled down and went home, where upon completing the task, I was rewarded with a netherite hammer, which was just insane. Did I mention that it had efficiency 5 and unbreaking 10 on it? Yeah, I know. Crazy. After testing out the amazing new hammer, I headed to the quartermaster to claim a task. I also submitted the stack of world engine blocks I had, which I think were being added to the world engine itself. I wanted to circle back to the task to make obsidian plates, which required a foundry. Using some clay and sand, I crafted some fire clay and smelted it into fire bricks. Following the diagram, I tried to build a foundry but was getting an error message. I searched around and saw this step-by-step guide on how to make it, which I was very thankful for. After fixing the foundry and adding both a tap and a casting table, it was done. After using a plate as a mold, I added some lava and melted some steel, creating molten steel. This could then be poured over the mold, and once cooled would make a plate cast. I now needed to make an obsidian plate, so I gathered a piece of obsidian and added it to the foundry. It did take a while to melt down, but eventually I poured myself an obsidian plate, completing the quest and rewarding me with a lava chicken. It was then on to the next quest, which required some brass and a train casing. These were pretty simple to get, just needing some simple metal infusing. Once the brass was ready, all I had to do to get the train casing was place a brass ingot on a stripped log to first get a brass casing. Then by putting the obsidian plate onto that, I got the train casing. And since I figured I need a good source of lava, I placed down the lava chicken. Of course in a pit, just in case it would kill me somehow. Luckily it didn't, but it did lay a lava egg. I had no idea what to expect, so I placed it next to the chicken where I learned that it was essentially a lava bucket. I did save the chicken though before placing him in a 1x1 cage with a hopper, hopefully giving me an infinite supply of lava eggs. On day 20, I wanted to start exploring, as I knew I could loot some dungeons somewhere in this world. To find one, however, I'd need an explorer's compass, which helps locate any structure in the world. For this though, I would need ferrocore ore, which I could get by making goo. I did need some raw flesh though, so I built a quick spawn room and killed some zombies. Once I had the goo crafted, I placed it down and fed it some raw flesh, kind of like a sourdough starter. And by putting an iron block next to it, the goo would slowly spread onto the block, eventually turning into ferrocore ore. I crafted a compass, and with some other materials in the world engine, crafted the explorer's compass. I first located a stone dungeon, but before heading out, I crafted a set of diamond armor, as well as a sword and some shields. I set out on day 21 to find the stone dungeon. I dug through hundreds of blocks of stone, following the compass until I finally reached it. I took a break from the dungeon to head back home. My inventory was getting full, and I needed some more supplies. I enchanted a few weapons and got some more food, and then returned back to loot the rest of the dungeon. Exploring the dungeon took me well into day 24, where I returned home to organize my loot. I wanted a more organized chest area, so I started building out another corner section similar to the first. I originally put in regular wooden chests, but soon after gained a few brain cells and realized, just like the furnaces, there are also iron chests. I started with a few of them, and these were awesome. One chest was the same size as a regular double chest. I then spent the rest of the day getting as much gold as I could to upgrade the iron chests to gold ones. Once these were in, I really didn't need that many chests, and chopped down the rest of them. I spent the rest of the day continuing organizing the chests. This ended up taking a while, but there was just so many random items that I collected that this just needed to be done. On day 26, I wanted to finish the task from the machinist. To do this, I had to find the create vault and get shadow steel. So I set my explorer's compass to a create vault and started mining. I got to where the compass was directing me, but there was nothing. I even dug a staircase down to see if I was above it, but I couldn't find anything. I double checked the task and figured maybe talking to the machinist would fix the issue. Sure enough, I was given the compass that directed me to the correct vault, which was in fact not the create vault, it was the machinist's vault. Luckily, I had already finished the stone dungeon since the northmost point got me pretty close to the vault already. After digging just a bit more, I could now teleport straight to the entrance. I was expecting a hostile, dangerous dungeon like the stone one, but it turns out this one was actually quite pleasant. It really just took me through some steps on how to use different create machines. It was actually a pretty cool tutorial section, until I was attacked by this horrifying living chest. This thing genuinely freaked me out, and I hope I never have to see one of these for the rest of my life. Carrying on to the next room, which was, well, you'll just have to see. There we go. Oh! Oh, that hurts. Oh, that hurts. What the heck? Oh no. Why does he do so much damage? Whew. Okay, that was close. Oh my goodness. The next few rooms taught me about how to grab chains with the wrench tool, how you can create fake blocks, and how you can use fans to suck yourself onto the roof. It was then onto this parkour section, which I totally failed. Not only was I embarrassed, but a nearby spawner activated and spawned what seemed to be an evoker. During the struggle, which I was definitely losing, he blew me back and I landed in a 1x1 hole. This hole would end up saving my life, as down the ladder was the entrance to the back rooms. It was so cool to see all the redstone and command blocks required for this dungeon. There was also the benefit of getting to skip this whole underwater section, which I was definitely happy about. I took the elevator back up to the start and looted a chest full of shadow steel and brass. Back home, I got to work on making the shadow casings I needed for the task. These were made by simply slapping the shadow steel onto some train casings we made earlier. I also had to make an encased chain drive, which was another simple crafting recipe. This task rewarded me with some blaze gold leggings, which didn't really seem any better than my diamond ones, but I'd wear them for now. With those casings done, the machinist quest line was complete, and the casings were added to the world engine. I then started work on the magician's task, the first of which being to craft archwood planks. This was pretty easy to do since I could just get some saplings by brushing dirt, or well, getting my villager to. The next task was to make an imbuement chamber, which once crafted, could turn lapis into source gems. The next task was to make a source jar and source links. After that was done, the last thing I needed was to make a Dominion wand in the world engine and a bit of source stone. I'm not sure if I was missing something, but these tasks were really easy to complete, and they also didn't really require me to do much, so maybe you guys can let me know in the comments if there's something I missed. Anyways, I submitted the source stone to the Echo, but this time it was weird. Normally it plays a cool little animation, but I think it was broken. Either way, I did double check and the blocks were there, so we were fine. With the magician's questline complete, I had officially completed all 3 of the Echo's quests. For my hard work, the Echo of Guidance rewarded me with 3 more Echoes to do quests for. Honestly, I was fine with this since I was having a lot of fun doing these quests. I decided to start with the Enchanter's quest, since I wanted to start upgrading my diamond gear. I figured someone specializing in enchanting would be able to help me. The first task from the Enchanter was a rather daunting one. I needed to get some echo shards from an ancient city. Yes, the same ancient city that spawns the Warden. So, using the Explorer's Compass, I set out to either get echo shards or to meet my maker. Thankfully, a lot of the travel was made through my previous tunnels, but I still had a few hundred blocks to dig. It took me about 10 minutes until I made it to the ancient city. We found it. I'm really hoping it's just like the vanilla ancient cities because I know how to tackle those. From what I can tell, it looks like it's the same, of course minus the nether dungeon over there. But now I need to loot some of these chests and hopefully get some echo shards, and that is a lot of shriekers there. I don't like seeing this. That is just horrible. Oh, this is so tough. This first chest is almost impossible to get. I'm hoping if we entrap the chest like this, that should be enough to protect it. Okay, let's do this quick minigame first, and then we'll see if we're safe. Oh, okay, we're good. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing any of the echo shards, and really nothing good. Honestly, I'll take that goal, but besides that, and the books, of course, but besides that, really not anything good in this chest. Well, let's carry on and see if we can find any other chests to loot. Oh, nice. This one has no shriekers anywhere close to it. Oh, there we go. Echo shards. Perfect. Oh, and a Fortune 3 Efficiency 5 Diamond Hoe. I will take that for sure. I took a look at the next quest, which required Hell Shelves. These are made from nether bricks, and since the ancient city was intersecting with the nether dungeon, I figured I'd go loot it as well. By day 32, I had gotten all the blaze rods and nether brick I needed, so I teleported home. It was now time to get crafting some hell shelves. I first set up a small sugarcane farm powered by my glutes. With the bookshelves, I can now make hell shelves. Now, you may have noticed a potion of regeneration in the crafting recipe. Well, I sure didn't. Unfortunately, this potion requires gas tears to make, and of course I didn't grab a single one. So it was back to the nether dungeon. Before heading out, I did craft a backpack and enchant my gear, even turning some into netherite. Of course, I couldn't duplicate my smithing templates because I made the mistake of smelting all of my netherrack. It seemed like I just couldn't stop making mistakes. Anyways, by day 34, I had returned to the nether dungeon. Luckily, the first chest I found had gas tears in it, so I knew they weren't that rare. I also gathered a bit more netherrack before heading back home. Another question you may be asking is, how are you going to brew potions without nether wart? Well, I had that same question and the answer was I couldn't. So I kid you not, I had to go all the way back for the third time just to get some nether warts. And I promise you, this annoyed me just as much as it's probably annoying you. Anyways, I made it back to the nether dungeon and gathered a whole lot of nether wart. I did also go around the dungeon to grab any items I missed or that I thought I would need for the task. By day 35, I was finally back home and able to get started on my quests. I first got to work brewing some regeneration potions. Using them, I could make hell shelves, which I needed for the task. I also needed infused hell shelves, which is where I got a little confused. I first thought I needed to be level 30 to infuse them, so I gathered some XP for my furnaces. This, however, did not fix the issue. I then noticed in the recipe I needed 45 Eterna and at least 30% Quanta. So I tried adding some regular bookshelves since they each gave 2 Eterna, but this didn't increase my total at all. This did make me wonder though, if I replaced some of the regular bookshelves with hell shelves, would that solve the issue? So on day 36 I tested my theory. I brewed up some more potions, crafted some more hell shelves, and replaced some regular bookshelves. To my delight, this actually worked and both Eterna and Quanta were increasing. However, I was out of gas tiers and just a few Eterna short. Instead of going back to the nether, I did look into other bookshelves that could increase Eterna. I found that bookshelves made simply from 3 enchanted books would work. So I crafted some with some spare books I had, and these were just enough to get all the Eterna I needed. But of course, there was a new issue. I needed 45 levels, and well, I only had a measly 28. To get the required XP, I had 2 ideas. The first was to smelt a whole load of ores, and since I had a geologist working 24/7, I had no shortage. During this time, I did some research into my second idea and found something called a mob masher. To move the mobs into the masher, I could use mob fans. So I crafted some and tested them out, only to find out that the area of effect was super small. To increase its range, I'd need fan upgrades crafted with feathers. Unfortunately, I only had about 2 feathers to my name, so using the eggs from my lava chicken, I made a small chicken farm. Between breeding the chickens, killing mobs, and smelting ores, by day 39 I had made it to level 45 and could infuse a hell shelf. After claiming the reward, I checked the next task, which was to make 4 deep shelves. And if you thought the infused shelves needed a lot of XP, these required me to be level 60. So I put these on hold for now while I both worked on an XP farm and tackled other tasks. On day 40, I went to talk with the new Echo, the Echo of the Wayfinder. Their first task for me was to craft Chronoton glass, which required a Chronoton star. Now, to actually get the Chronoton star, I need to complete what was called the Wayfinder Vault. Using the compass, I dug through hundreds of stone and finally made it to the vault. Alright, here we are at the Wayfinder Vault, and just below there is the start of it, and I'm honestly not sure what to expect. I have no idea what's down here. So I'm gonna put my shield on and let's go down. Oh, cool, okay. It's like a test facility or something. We have a barrel here. Oh, with a portal gun. That's cool, and some long fall boots. But a portal gun, that's cool. This does look like the Portal games. Okay, so I'm guessing now we just have to find a way out of here. And I did notice this stair here, so we'll see if we can get out here somehow. Maybe if I just click like that. Oh, perfect. There we go. All right, what does it say here? You may be required to find buttons inside the test chambers. Oh yeah, I saw this button. This one was not hard to miss. So there we go. I think we should be on to the next room now. Place cubes on gold blocks to trigger doors or specific contraptions. Okay, so that is really just like the Portal games. Test cubes are your best friends, so don't lose them. Don't worry, I will probably lose them. Anyways, we take our test cube here and put it on the gold block, and that should open up this door. Perfect. I carried on through a few more rooms, each getting slightly harder to figure out. At one point, I even had to fight these beetle creatures, which genuinely sent shivers up my spine. These things were disgusting, and I hope I'd never have to see them again. I continued through the vault, at one point getting stuck and having to run all the way back from my base. But once I returned, it was then onto the final room, which was kind of like a boss room. In here, I needed to complete various tasks, like some parkour or finding some secret passageways. Doing this would destroy a piece of Gladys, and after doing 4 of them, completed the vault. It was all worth it, however, as for my troubles, I was rewarded with a Chronoton star. By day 42, I had returned from the vault and got to work on the Chronoton glass. It was pretty simple to make, since I just needed to combine a few things I already had in the world engine. It did run out of energy, however, so I had to buy another energy cube to solve this. Finishing the quest, I received an experience obelisk, which could store nearby experience. This would be super useful for any future XP farms I wanted to make. On day 43, I wanted to work on the base a bit. I'd need to soon start working with a lot of new technologies, and I wanted an organized space to do that. So I first bought an impact core from the machinist. Using this, I can craft a diamond reinforced hammer, which was a huge upgrade. This thing mines in a 5x5 area, which is just insane. I also enchanted it with Silk Touch and Efficiency 5, since I needed just regular deep slate for decoration. Over the next 5 days, I worked on improving the base. First, I upgraded all of my chests to crystal chests. I also got the bonsai pot back up and running, and moved the auto smelter. The rest of the time was spent building, first designing this wooden arch that would sit in each corner. I then worked on a floor design to replace the vanilla deep slate bricks. I felt it was kind of lame for me to use vanilla blocks in a mod pack with so many options. I then went around and added these sconces, which just look so much cooler than regular torches. For the stair trim, I changed out the old deep slate stairs for these new ones, and added a stone terracotta ceiling. Alright, so I've finished up decorating the whole spawn area, so I think we'll do a quick tour and I'll show you around. First is this main area, which I think you can probably see what I meant earlier about having kind of a main hub area and then it branching off into different hallways here. And then for the roof, I did this super cool stone design. I wanted to keep the base feel of Stoneblock alive, so I did this design with the kind of wooden supports holding back the stone, just to remind you that we are in a fully stone world. And then here we have the other corner segments, which I redecorated. If you use a mix of deep slate pillars and layered deep slate, you can actually do this checkerboard design, which looks super cool. And I really like how this turned out. And yeah, that's pretty much it so far. I mean, I did all the 4 corners, which feels really good to have done finally. But as for what's going to go in these yet, I am not too sure. After the tour, it was on to the next fabricator task, which was to make a superheating element in the world engine. This was a pretty simple craft, the hardest thing probably being the magnetic coil. The next task was to make ultimate thermodynamic conductors, which was a lot more complex. I first had to infuse some osmium to get basic control circuits. I then had to make a crusher using some lava eggs. This was needed to make diamond dust. I mean, diamonds are the hardest substance, so I guess you wouldn't expect a flimsy netherite hammer to do the trick. Anyways, once the diamonds were pulverized into dust, I could infuse an infused alloy to get a reinforced alloy. I could then crush some obsidian and infuse the dust with diamonds to make refined obsidian dust. Finally, infusing the refined obsidian dust into the reinforced alloy would get me the atomic alloy. The rest of the crafting was just making some basic thermodynamic conductors and slowly upgrading them with different alloys. This finally allowed me to finish the quest, and all I needed to do to complete the fabricator's questline was to make a simple resistive heater. After speaking with the fabricator, I returned home to focus back on the XP situation. My chicken farm had been producing eggs like crazy, and since I had literally hundreds of them in storage, I figured it was time. I needed feathers, and these chickens had served their life purpose. Don't worry, I did keep their bloodlines going and filled the chicken farm back up with more. Anyways, the first step in the XP farm was making a mob masher, which is what would actually kill the mobs. I also crafted some looting and sharpness upgrades for it. Now it was on to the fan upgrades, which was originally why I needed the feathers. These were crucial to the farm since the default range of the fan was really bad. On day 51, I took my fans and started work on the XP farm. I made sure they covered a large area around the dreadful dirt and dug a water trench to funnel the mobs into the masher. All that was left to do was get the fan upgrades in and close up the farm. It wasn't anything special, but thanks to the experience obelisk, this would passively generate me XP while I worked on other things. The next day, I decided I wanted to start getting more animals in, so I bought a gate pearl, which would spawn me some passive mobs. I did have to earn it, however, as I had to fight multiple waves of mobs. Now, I thought this was going to be a piece of cake, but more than once I was overwhelmed by the mobs and I had to retreat. So yeah, if you do this, just be careful. Once I killed all the mobs, I gave the animals some spacious pens, and spent the rest of the day organizing chests and smelting some auras. I did also go to breed the chickens when I did something very stupid. I jumped in and immediately took entity cramming damage, which was not good. I panicked and opened a teleporter to my base, which released my army of chickens all over the place. So unfortunately, I did have to round them up and kill them. This was sad, but it also helped with the feather situation, so it was kind of a double-edged sword, kind of like the one I was using to kill them. On day 53, I looked into finishing the Enchanter's quests. These still required me to get to level 60, but I also needed to increase my Arcana to 40%. This would not be easy, as this required about 12 glowing hell shelves. So with the knowledge that this would take a while to complete, I decided to talk with the Echo and work on the tier 3 quest in the meantime. This unlocked another 3 new Echoes, the Infernal, the Catalyst, and the Lightbender. So I spoke with all 3 to get a better idea of what they offer. Before starting any quests, I did want to quickly upgrade my backpack to a diamond backpack. It was such a simple upgrade but increased my backpack size so much. On day 54, I looked through the quests and decided to start with the Infernal's questline. For this, I would need to access the vault by using a pig step disc. Of course, I didn't grab one the last time I was at a nether dungeon because who would? Anyways, I quickly repaired my gear and completed my set of netherite armor before heading back out to the nether dungeon. As I was creeping through the ancient city, I caught a glance of some candles. Now, this doesn't sound exciting, but I noticed the candles increased Arcana. I needed this to complete the Enchanter's quest, so this was a huge discovery. Anyways, I carried on through the dungeon and looted a pig step disc pretty quickly. By day 56, I had done enough looting, and since I just discovered that candles provide Arcana, I wanted to test that out. I started messing around with the enchanting table, adding candles to try and increase the stats. It did work, but I was noticing that Eterna wasn't increasing past 45. At this point, I decided to look through the quest book to see if I could find something that explained this. And this is where it clicked. The hell shells provided only up to 45 Eterna. And to get deep shells, I would need to have several upgraded hell shelves. These could either be the blazing hell shelves or glowing hell shelves, both requiring materials I didn't have. So guess what? Back to the nether dungeon. This time, I made sure to spend as much time as possible, gathering every piece of loot I would need. By day 60, after looking through countless chests and killing a whole load of mobs, my backpack was full and I was sure that now I would have everything I needed to finish the Enchanter's questline. So I brewed up some more regen potions and crafted some hell shells. After infusing them in the enchanting table and turning them into blazing hell shells, my setup now had enough stats to work on the next bookshelf type, the deep shelf. But to infuse these, I would need to be level 60, so it was time to start upgrading my mob farm. The first thing I did was make the killing channel 3 blocks wide. Since before, slimes were getting stuck. I also changed the water out for some fans, since it was causing Enderman to teleport out of the farm and into my base. I also added fans next to the mob masher, as well as a hopper collection system. After putting in some tinted glass, most of the upgrades were done, except for one, the mob spawners. So far, I'd been using natural spawning and the dreadful dirt to get my mobs, but since I silk touched a whole load of spawners in the nether, I could now use those. So after pushing up the roof a couple blocks, it was time to add the spawners. I started with 8 skeleton spawners, followed by 3 enderman spawners and 3 wither skeleton spawners. After closing it up, I noticed that only regular skeletons were spawning, but lowering the other spawners seemed to fix the issue. Now that the farm was done, I could check the rates. And well, judging by the insane stream of mobs coming in, I'd say the rates are pretty good. I juggled between the mob farm and smelting ores and eventually got to level 60. I was now finally able to infuse my first deep shelf. Now, I just needed to repeat that process and infuse another 5 of them. By day 63, I had all the levels I needed to infuse the deep shelves. Oh, and I also installed some lava dispensers to dispose of the loot, since I was just getting way too many drops. Anyways, I infused the shelves and crafted 2 echoing deep shelves for the quest. I turned them in and got another netherite hammer. I appreciated the game helping me out, but my first one was still doing just fine. After talking with the enchanter, they took my deep shells and added them to the world engine. Returning to the tier 3 questlines, I got a good look at the Ignis boss and figured I was gonna need some serious gear if I wanted to fight him. The first thing that would help was crafting this music disc that apparently triples my damage against the boss. For this, I'd first need blaze gold. This can be gathered by turning some regular goo into blaze bloom goo. So I set some up in what I will now call the goo room and let it spread over to some gold blocks. The next item on the list was Isnium, which I could get from a dimensionalist villager. This villager's workstation was crafted with some lead sheet metal, advanced electronic components which I needed to buy from an echo, and an echo shard. I ran out of echo shards when crafting the echoing deep shelves, so I did have to return to the ancient city to loot some more. I ended up spending about a day here, looting any chests I could find, and got some items that I'm sure I would need for crafting later. Now that I had the workstation crafted, I duplicated a villager and hired them as a dimensionalist. It was at this point that I was going through a wandering trader's trades and saw a teleporter. After looking into how they worked, I figured I could link a block in the world with the teleporter base. This gave me hope. Hope that I wouldn't have to constantly run hundreds of blocks just to get to the other layers. So I bought one, made an ender shard, and linked a block to the teleporter. Sure enough, it worked exactly how I thought. With that knowledge, I took 2 ender shards and headed out. I linked one to a spot right outside the ancient city, and the other to the netherrack ring on the outside of the nether dungeon. I went home and linked the teleporter and boom, I now had instant travel to both the nether ring and the deep slate ring. It's truly amazing what you can learn by just going through some random menus in this mod pack. Anyways, since my villager needed time to level up, I spent the rest of the day reading through all the different guides I could find, hoping to find information on getting better armor. I found a section on irons, gems, and jewelry and started working towards figuring this out. Little did I know this would take me on quite the side quest. I first took the crafting components to the world engine, but nothing happened. I figured out I needed to fuel the world engine with source, which was a huge problem because my source jar has been empty this entire time. It said the source links would gather source from the world, so admittedly I tried some really weird setups. As I was reading through a guidebook, I saw an item called the Mycenial Source Link. This gave me an idea. However, to make this source link I needed mushroom stew. I only had brown mushrooms in storage, so I had to go looking for some red ones. I originally thought I saw some before at the nether dungeon, but this was unfortunately not true. It then clicked. I remembered seeing some at the stone dungeon. Sure enough, they were there in all of their red and white glory. After crafting the source link, it was time to test my idea. I bought some mycelium from the wandering trader and combined them. I thought maybe the soil and some mushrooms would generate source. I was about to give up and threw some mushrooms and chicken at it, not expecting anything to happen. That was when it seemed to absorb the chicken. Listen, I have no idea why a Mycenial Source Link wanted cooked chicken, but at least it was filling up the source jar. Now it was on to the next issue. How do I get the source into the world engine? Nothing I did worked, so it was back to the guidebook, where I found I needed the Dominion wand. Remember that wand I made many days ago? Don't worry, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. Anyways, with the wand I could transfer the source to the world engine and craft the jewel crafting station. I messed around with it for a bit and crafted a blaze gold ring. I also noticed that a netherite ring would increase my attack damage, but I didn't have enough to justify that. By this time, my villager was high enough level to brush up Isnium dust, which meant I could now craft the music disc. Oh, what's that? You thought I was serious? Well, turns out to craft the disc, I needed to provide the world engine with some good old kinetic energy. So it was time for another side quest, this time learning about the create mod. It took me a while to figure out, but after testing a few different ideas, I eventually got it. All I needed was simply a large cogwheel with a hand crank. Now that the music disc was crafted, I got to work on my armor set. I wanted to make a brand new set, since thanks to my new villager, netherite wasn't a problem. I first tested the enchanting table and got this crazy chest plate. This opened my eyes and I went on an enchanting spree. I even moved my enchanting setup next to the mob farm for efficiency. By day 73, I had all of my gear enchanted and upgraded to netherite, and I even made myself a netherite great hammer. I also made some other gear that would give me passive buffs, which were pretty much just rings. I made a netherite and diamond ring, which gave me more armor, a netherite and emerald ring, which gave me a speed boost, and finally a regular netherite ring for extra damage. Lastly, I made a few regeneration and strength charms. I thought these would always be active, but they only have a limited duration, so I'm not sure how useful these will be. The next day, I spotted some garnet gems in a chest that, unlike the other gems I was trying to use, actually worked in the jewel crafting station. So, using them, I made an even better ring, an amulet, and a chain. I also finally discovered the use for the tiny red hearts that drop from mobs. They were to make these canisters, which once equipped, literally gave me an extra 20 hearts, which was just insane. On day 75, I wanted to really test my new gear set. I looked through my chest and found the Arcane Grove compass. The echoes had told me that this place was dangerous, so it seemed like the perfect spot. So I brewed some haste 2 potions and started mining. Once I got close, I teleported in. I searched around for a bit before entering the main house perched in the middle of the grove. Here, I got into a fight with an archwalker, but honestly, he didn't really put up much of a fight. I looted some more before hearing a mysterious sound under the house. I found the entrance and discovered the Weeping Well. I jumped in expecting some sort of boss fight, but turns out only items are supposed to go in. I read a bit about what the well did before heading home. I wanted a good fight, and that had not satisfied me. So I regrouped and headed out in search of an end dungeon. I'd need to first find the end ring, which actually didn't take too long thanks to my Instamine. Before making it to the dungeon, there were a few structures I spotted along the way. The first was this tiny room with a teleporter. It wasn't linked to anything though, so it was kinda useless. I then found a larger structure, which I was certain was home to a boss fight. I mean, it even had a boxing ring in the middle. I looked around but concluded that there was nothing here for me, so I carried on. By day 78, I had reached the end dungeon. I searched around, fighting a few new creatures and looting some decent chests until I got the boss fight I was looking for. I took out the Ender Guardian and it dropped a pretty good piece of loot. This was the Gauntlet of Guard, which not only had really good damage, but also increased my armor. I carried on through the dungeon, looting some chests that had some mending gear. I also fought a few of these mini bosses, which would have been a great warm up before the actual boss. By day 79, I had looted enough of the dungeon and returned home to organize the loot. My armor had taken a beating and badly needed some repairs. The first thing I wanted to do was enchant the Gauntlet of Guard, getting Sharpness 6 and Smite 6. At this point, I'd be using this as my main weapon, as its damage was definitely better. I also upgraded some of the mending gear to netherite and combined that with my current set. This not only repaired my set, but added mending to about half of my armor, which wasn't too bad. I also got a miniature yellow heart from the boss, and could now make a yellow heart canister. This did require one of my precious enchanted golden apples, but I think the extra health would be worth it. I also discovered Celesti Gem gear, which seemed to be regarded as better than netherite. It only required a few items from the ancient city, so this would be my next task. I set out to the ancient city and started my search for Skulk. Unfortunately, there was no easy way to gather it, and I had a few close calls. But before long, I had plenty of Skulk and could return home. I crafted some Void Shimmer goo and got it spreading to some diamond blocks. This ended up being quite expensive, but I'm sure it would be worth it. I was reading into Celesti Gems and saw that if you added it to a ring, it would enable creative flight. I did have a Celesti Gem for my task reward and tested it out on a gold ring, and yep, it was that simple. I now had permanent creative flight. By the time my joy flight was over, the Celesti Gems had grown and I could craft a chestplate. Before committing to a full set, I wanted to first figure out how to charge the armor. I searched around and eventually figured out I could just stick it in the heat generator to charge it. Knowing that, I could craft the rest of the set and get it all ready. I then spent the next 4 days, yes, 4 days, going back and forth between the mob farm and the enchanting table. Since I was enchanting at level 65, it took a while to get the needed XP. During this time, quite a bit did happen. I first got my gear enchanted at the 65 Eternal level. Then, after realizing I could increase my table stats, I worked on that. I could now upgrade my gear at 75 Eternal level, which took a lot longer. Then, after testing the armor, I noticed that it lost energy really quick when taking damage. After reading a bit more about the gear, I saw that the guide recommended to have a pocket generator to keep it energized. Thankfully, it was a simple craft and it was just powered by coal, so overall pretty cheap. But after all that work, by day 85 I had what I thought was a really good set of armor. I'm sure to some of you this is probably nothing, but to me it was really good. I wanted to give it a proper test, and search through the quest to find something to fight. I eventually decided that returning to the end dungeon would give me the best test. I jumped in to fight the Ender Guardian once again. To be honest, it actually did quite a bit of damage, but having creative flight definitely evened the playing field. Anyways, I moved on from the Guardian and worked towards the next ring of the world, the Twilight Forest Ring. I saw what looked like a new structure to explore and started mining towards it. I found a way in and started looking around. There were a few normal mobs, as well as some beefed up stray spawners. This is where I have to be honest, this structure sucked. I looted a few chests and found literally nothing good. I did find this giant open room and was expecting a good boss fight, but still nothing. There were these ice spider eggs, but I had no idea what to do with them. On the map, I saw more structures further north and continued mining. I was pretty disappointed by that structure I just looted, so I wanted a good dungeon to make up for it. Eventually, I reached the next ring, the Ocean Ring, where the main block was mossy cobblestone. I knew with the right setup I could insta-mine this, so I returned home and got some haste 2 potions. Unfortunately, these weren't quite enough to get the insta-mine going, so I devised a new plan. I made a Celesti Gem pickaxe, and after a few enchants got efficiency 6. This, combined with the haste potions, was enough to insta-mine, and I made it to the ocean dungeon in no time. As I got near, I heard what I think is one of the most horrifying sounds I've ever heard. That was a shadow beast, and this dungeon was full of them. Thankfully, they didn't do a whole lot of damage. I carried on through this dungeon, fighting many different mobs, like the Rift Minotaur and the Corrosive Crag. I did some looting around as well, but the loot was pretty mediocre. I continued through the world and headed to the next structure to loot. However, it was just another one of those ice spider caves, so it was kind of a bust. I headed home and decided that I wanted a proper boss fight. I felt my gear was good enough, so I gathered my stuff and headed out to fight Ignis. By day 92, I made it to the vault. I checked around, and after seeing it was safe, I looted a crimson barrel. In this barrel was a ribbon cleaver sword, which not only had great damage, but it had a charge ability that doubled my damage on the next swing. This could be the key to this boss fight, so I returned to base and quickly enchanted it with sharpness 7. I returned to the vault, and after mentally preparing, I put in the music disc. Of course, this did nothing since I was only supposed to hold it in my offhand. So I grabbed the pig step disc and played that, which started the Blaze Dance minigame. This groovy music was unfortunately short-lived, as I completed that minigame very quick. It did open a hole in the ground, which of course I jumped in without a second thought. In there I fought a few of these ancient knights, which were easy work from my new ribbon cleaver. Carrying on, I was met with what seemed like a password to open the next door. I kinda just guessed, and not surprisingly guessed wrong, when the room started to fill with lava. I thought I was playing Minecraft, but this felt like something out of Indiana Jones. I figured that I needed to match the first note block to the one by the door, which ended up working. The next 2 rooms were the same thing, but when I went to press the last note block, I fell through the floor. I fell into possibly the most boss fight looking room I've ever seen. So I got prepared and spawned in Ignis. That boss fight definitely satisfied my taste for a good battle, so I returned home. It was now time to claim my rewards and continue working on the quest line. My next quest was to learn how to make spirit-infused items. To do this, I first had to return to the Arcane Grove, as there I needed two things. The first was some runewood logs, for which I just had to cut some trees. The second was gathered at the Weeping Well, where after throwing in some raw iron, produced raw soulstone. After smelting it into refined soulstone, I could now craft a spirit altar. I needed to infuse iron with souls I gathered from some zombies and skeletons at the old stone dungeon. I tried setting up the spirit altar and placing in the items, but I was missing something. So I did some reading and found out I needed to place the soulstone on a pedestal near the altar. So I crafted some pedestals, placed down the soulstone, and for my hard work received a soul-stained steel ingot. To finally complete the Infernal's questline, I needed to craft some spirit blocks for the world engine. For this, I just needed to throw together a few items. After submitting the spirit blocks, they were added to the world engine, and I must say, it's definitely coming together quite nicely. The next quest was to make a nitro ender cell. Overall, this was a pretty simple thing to make, mostly using materials I'd already made before. I did have to make a new machine called an alloy smelter, which, after crafting a capacitator and sticking it next to the heat generators, I could use it to turn quartz into fused quartz. I brought all of the components needed to the world engine, where of course it didn't work. It turns out the world engine needed to be heated to 350 degrees Celsius, but mine was currently stuck at around 27. I tried several different things to raise the temperature, like filling the engine with lava, to straight up just pouring lava on it. I even tried to bring in my heat generators, but that didn't work either. I ran out of things to try, and so I gave up for now. If any of you know how to fix my problem, please let me know in the comments. Anyways, if I couldn't complete the Catalyst quests, I'd work on the Lightbenders ones. The first of which being to find and complete the Maze Vault. So I started digging, and thanks to my amazing pickaxe, this took no time at all. What did take a lot of time, however, was the maze. It was a simple concept, at least I thought, of progressing through the maze by pressing different buttons. These buttons would lower the force fields in certain areas, allowing me to progress. I made it through the first half just fine, until I got to this mystery button, which seemed to do nothing. I spent a long time trying to figure things out, at one point convinced that the maze was glitched. That was until I had a stroke of genius. I wondered if unpressing earlier buttons would open a new pathway later on. So I tested my theory on the first button, and right away noticed that this gave me access to a new button near the mystery one. Pressing that button then opened up a new pathway down which I could complete the maze. It also contained a chest with the loot I needed to complete the task. After, I spoke with the Echo where I could submit the 4 Fortron blocks to be added to the world engine. As I was running out of time, the last thing I could get done was one more task from the Lightbender. I needed to make a coercion deriver. The crafting recipe required steel, which I had none left and had to infuse some more. It was so weird because I remember this being a hard recipe at the start of this challenge, but now this was one of the easiest things I could make. Anyways, once the steel was done, I could now make the focus matrix required for the coercion deriver. At this point, there was one task left, but this required some complex crafting that I simply didn't have time for. So it was on to day 100, the final day. For the last day, I wanted to just take some time and discuss my experience. First, I really enjoyed this mod pack, and I think it has a great balance between telling you what to do and allowing you to discover how to progress. The different dungeons and bosses definitely kept things interesting. However, I think the dungeons at times were a little disappointing. Overall, this mod pack was still really fun, and I'd recommend you all to try it. With that said, I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.